Once I met a girl lost in a book, dreaming the past. Follow, she said, and jumped in a page. She smiled and she asked. Walked to Glenfinnan, waited with Charlie. We drank an old leaf, we were toasted by Robbie. We stood as they signed in our broth at the Abbey. She took me to places that I never thought you could see.
Hi, and welcome to episode 12, and what will be the last episode from Random Scottish History for Independence Live for the time being. We'll have completed a year's worth of episodes, so we've done an episode for every month of the last year. We started in February, and we've really been sticking to what we celebrate in each of the months, be it Valentine's Day, therefore we're talking about love and romance. Maybe it's Pride season, so we got into a bit of homosexuality in Scottish history. We had, obviously, Halloween, and we had the festive season in the last episode. So this month, we started off the year with January the 1st, being New Year's Day, and we will also discuss Burns Night, which was just a couple of days ago. We obviously start the year with Burns, with Auld Lang Syne. In fact, the dulcet tones of humanity worldwide resound with Auld Lang Syne. Such is the extent of Burns's fame, really. It's become how many nationalities see in the new year these days. So I thought we would start. We did The Book of Days by Robert Chambers, an 1886 publication, which took us through the festive season in Hogmanay, and I figured that would see us for the new year as well. So he begins with a poem, and I know there's always a poem in every single one of these episodes somewhere, but we're actually starting with a poem by James Graham, Scottish poet. Long ere the lingering dawn of that blithe morn, which ushers in the year, the roosting cock, flapping his wings, repeats his larum shrill. But on that morn no busy flail obeys, his rousing call no sounds, but sounds of joy. Salute the year, the first foot's entering step, that sudden on the floor is welcome heard. Your blushing maids have braided up their hair, the laugh, the hearty kiss, the good new year. Pronounced with honest warmth, in village, grange, and borough town, the steaming flagon borne, from house to house, elates the poor man's heart, and makes him feel that life has still its joys. The aged and the young, man, woman, child, unite in social glee, even stranger dogs, meeting with bristling back, soon lay aside their snarling aspect, and in sportive chase, excursive, scour, or wallow in the snow. With sober cheerfulness, the grandame eyes her offspring round her, all in health and peace, and thankful that she's spared to see this day, return once more, breathes low a secret prayer, that God would shed a blessing on their heads. As New Year's Day, the 1st of January, bears a prominent place in the popular calendar, it has ever been a custom among northern nations to see the old year out and the new one in, with the highest demonstrations of merriment and conviviality. To but a few does it seem to occur that the day is a memorandum of the subtraction of another year from the little sum of life. With the multitude, the top feeling is a desire to express good wishes for the next 12 months' experience of their friends, and be the subject of similar benevolence on the part of others, and to see this interchange of cordial feeling take place, as far as possible, in festive circumstances. Very frequently, too, persons nearly related but living apart dine with each other on this day to keep alive and cultivate mutual good feeling. It cannot be doubted that a custom of this kind must tend to obliterate any shades of dissatisfaction or jealous anger that may have arisen during the previous year, and send the kindred onward through the next with renewed esteem and regard. To the same good purpose works the old custom of giving little presents among friends on this day. One could wish that the genial Elia had added something in recommendation of resolutions of improvement for the year to come, for which New Year's Day is surely a most appropriate time. Every 1st of January that we arrive at is an imaginary milestone on the turnpike track of human life, at once a resting place for thought and meditation, and a starting point for fresh exertion in the performance of our journey. The man who does not at least propose to himself to be better this year than he was last must be either very good or very bad indeed. And only to propose to be better is something, if nothing else. It is an acknowledgment of our need to be so, which is the first step towards amendment. But in fact, to propose to oneself to do well is in some sort to do well, positively, for there is no such thing as a stationary point in human endeavours. He who is not worse today than he was yesterday is better, and he who is not better is worse. The custom of wassail at the New Year was kept up in the monasteries as well as in private houses. In front of the abbot, at the upper end of the refectory table, was placed the mighty bowl styled in their language Poculum Caritatis, and from it the superior drank to all, and all drank in succession to each other. Till very few years ago in Scotland, the custom of the wassail bowl at the passing away of the old year might be said to be still in comparative vigour. On the approach of 12 o'clock, a hot pint was prepared, that is, a kettle or flagon full of warm, spiced, and sweetened ale, with an infusion of spirits. When the clock had struck the knell of the departed year, each member of the family drank of this mixture, a good health and a happy new year, and many of them. To all the rest, with a general hand-shaking and perhaps a dance round the table, with the addition of a song to the tune of Hey Tutty Tatty. Weel may we a' be, ill may we never see, here's to the king and the good company, etc. The elders of the family would then most probably sally out with the hot kettle and bearing also a competent provision of buns and shortbread, or bread and cheese, with the design of visiting their neighbours and interchanging with them the same cordial greetings. If they met by the way another party similarly bent, whom they knew, they would stop and give and take sips from their respective kettles. Reaching the friend's house, they would enter with vociferous good wishes, and soon send the kettle a-circulating. If they were the first to enter the house since 12 o'clock, they were deemed as the first foot, and as such it was most important for luck to the family in the coming year that they should make their entry not empty-handed, but with their hands full of cakes and bread and cheese, of which, on the other hand, civility demanded that each individual in the house should partake. To such an extent did this custom prevail in Edinburgh in the recollection of persons still living, that according to their account the principal streets were more thronged between 12 and 1 in the morning than they usually were at midday. Much innocent mirth prevailed, and mutual good feelings were largely promoted. An unlucky circumstance which took place on the 1st of January of 1812 proved the means of nearly extinguishing the custom. A small party of reckless boys formed the design of turning the innocent festivities of first footing to account for purposes of plunder. They kept their counsel well. No sooner had the people come abroad in the principal thoroughfares of the old town than these youths sallied out in small bands and commenced the business which they had undertaken. The previous agreement was to look out for the white neckcloths, such being the best mark by which they could distinguish in the dark individuals likely to carry any property worthy of being taken. A great number of gentlemen were thus spoiled of their watches and other valuables. The least resistance was resented by the most brutal maltreatment. A policeman and a young man of the rank of a clerk in Leith died of the injuries they had received. An affair so singular, so uncharacteristic of the people among whom it happened, produced a widespread and lasting feeling of surprise. The outrage was expiated by the execution of 3 of the youthful rioters on the chief scene of their wickedness. But from that time it was observed that the old custom of going about with the hot pint, the ancient wassail, fell off. There was in Scotland a first-footing independent of the hot pint. It was a time for some youthful friend of the family to steal to the door in the hope of meeting there the young maiden of his fancy, and obtaining the privilege of a kiss as her first foot. Great was the disappointment on his part, and great the joking among the family, if through accident or plan some half-withered aunt or ancient grandam came to receive him instead of the blooming Jenny. It may safely be said that New Year's Day has hitherto been observed in Scotland with a heartiness nowhere surpassed. It almost appears as if by a sort of antagonism to the general gravity of the people, they were impelled to break out in a half-mad merriment on this day. Every face was bright with smiles, every hand ready with the grasp of friendship. All stiffness arising from age, profession, and rank gave way. The soberest felt entitled to take a licence on that special day. Reunions of relatives very generally took place over the festive board, and thus many little family differences were obliterated. At the present time the ancient practices are somewhat decayed, yet the 1st of January is far from being reduced to the level of other days. So, he didn't mention Burns or Auld Lang Syne there, did he? Which is very strange for a Scottish history book talking about New Year's. But I've said it before and I'll repeat it again. There were Scottish writers writing on Scottish topics, but for an English audience. And sometimes it was really difficult to work out that a person who's being described, the hunters, for example, the brothers, the medical brothers, who instigated the Hunterian museums, etc., and did a lot of good in terms of medicine. I think it was William Hunter ended up down in London, and he was talked about by Robert Chambers. You could not have told that the brothers came from East Kilbride or Scotland, much less, in his writings. So footnotes every so often have to be added to the writings of people like Robert Chambers or Cosmo Innes, for example, because they'll write about Scotland, but again, it's for an English audience. So in their mind, we need to anglicise this to a certain extent to make it more palatable for the audience that they were trying to attract at the time. I think they felt like Scottish history wasn't of interest to Scots. I'm not sure where that thinking came from. While I'll not treat you to a rendition of Auld Lang Syne as sung by myself, honestly, you'd not want that. No one wants that. I do have notes on the poem itself, from the poetry of Robert Burns, published in 1896, a centenary edition. Burns sent to Mrs. Dunlop on the 17th of December 1788. Apropos, is not the Scotch phrase Auld Lang Syne exceedingly expressive? There is an old song in tune which has often thrilled through my soul, etc. To Thomson he wrote, "One song more and I have done. Auld Lang Syne. The air is but mediocre, but the following song, this old song of the olden times, in which has never been in print nor even in manuscript, until I took it down from an old man singing, is enough to recommend any air." Thomson in Scottish Airs expressed the opinion that Burns thus wrote merely in a playful humour. It may also be that the story was a device to make sure that he, Thomson, would accept a piece which the writer was far too modest to describe as his own improvement on the earlier sets. The one published in Watson, 1711, the other credited to Alan Ramsay, which is available on Random Scottish History. But after all, it is by no means impossible that he really got the germ of his set as he says he did. The oldest as given in Watson is in 2 pages. Should old acquaintance be forgot and never thought upon, the flames of love extinguished and freely past and gone, Is thy kind heart now grown so cold in that loving breast of thine, that thou canst never once reflect on auld lang syne, etc. It is usually attributed to Francis Semple, but the broadside from which Watson got it, and of which there is a copy, probably unique, in the Lane collection at Dalmeny, is headed thus: An excellent and proper new ballad entitled Auld Lang Syne, newly corrected and amended with a large and new addition of several excellent love lines. The title is important, as indicating the existence of an older set, and that Burns either knew the set or had seen this said broadside is clear, since instead of the mere refrain of Auld Lang Syne as in Watson, it has this burden. On Auld Lang Syne, on Auld Lang Syne, my Jo, on Auld Lang Syne, that thou canst never once reflect on Auld Lang Syne. The Ramsay derivative also takes the form of a love song, in which a lady, by way of greeting her hero newly home from the wars, inquires, should auld acquaintance be forgot, though they return with scars? And concluding that they shouldn't, goes on to cry, Welcome, my Varro, to my breast, thy arms about me twine, and make me once again as blessed as I was lang syne. After diverse reflections, which attest her acquaintance with poets and politic authors, she concludes her incantation thus irresistibly: O'er moor and dale with your gay friend you may pursue the chase, and after a blithe bottle end all cares in my embrace, and in a vacant rainy day you shall be wholly mine, will make the hours run smooth away, and laugh at lang syne. The hero, perceiving that her intentions are strictly honourable, assents, and the piece concludes with a wedding in the wig-maker's poet's best full-bottom style. Two anti-union ballads of 1707 to the tune of Auld Lang Syne are in the Roxburgh collection. One is a parody of the earlier set. Shall monarchy be quite forgot, and of it no more heard? Antiquity be razed out, and slavery put instead? Is Scotsman blood now grown so cold, the valour of their mind, that they can never once reflect on Auld Lang Syne? The other, O Caledon, which Mr. Ebsworth regards as unique, is in the Lane collection as well. It was known to George Lockhart, 1673 to 1731, and was published in the Lockhart Papers, 1817. There is, besides, a Jacobite ballad on similar lines, and slightly bacchanalian like the Burns set, in the True Loyalist of 1779. Should old gay mirth and cheerfulness be dashed for evermore, etc. Scott Douglas mentions a parody by Burns. Should auld acquaintance be forgot and never thought upon, let's hae a walk to Malaga for Auld Lang Syne. So Robert Burns was born on the 25th of January here in Scotland, and Scots societies and those with Scots ancestry the world over, much like on St Andrew's Day, celebrate Burns Night, and they have haggis and they sing songs and read poems, and there's a whole format for how these nights go. They're fairly structured, a proper Burns Night. So the order of service for a structured Burns Night begins with a recitation of the Selkirk Grace, which is recited by the host. Some hae meat and canna eat, and some hae nane as wants it, but we hae meat and we can eat, so let the Lord be thankit. Soup course, cock-a-leekie soup. Haggis is served, whole, on the platter to the host. Then a recitation of address to haggis. At the line, his knife sees rustic labour dight, the host takes his skein due in hand, and at the next line, and cut ye up wi' ready slight, sticks it into the haggis and cuts it open. It's a big moment in a Burns Night, you know. The haggis is said by all, as a toast is raised with glasses in hand. You've got the haggis course, which is haggis, neeps and tatties. You've got your boiled potatoes and turnip with your haggis. Will not get into my feelings on this particular meal. Then you've got the dessert course, which is a standard clootie dumpling. Then Immortal Memory. It's a speech, usually by the host, about Burns, with maybe some snippets of his poetry interspersed throughout. Then you have a Toast to the Lassies, which is a short speech given by a designated male member of the gathering to the females present. And this can be as serious or as satirical as suits the temperament of those in attendance. Then there's the Reply to the Laddies. So a female chosen from the gathering will stand to reply in the manner appropriate to the male offering previously. It's often the case that the two assigned to deliver these toasts combine their efforts to make for a more entertaining end to the dinner. Then you have Tam O'Shanter, an able reciter, is chosen to entertain with a spirited rendition of this favourite tale of one man's close call with Satan and his minions. I'm not reading any of these Burns poems. You have to be a special kind of person in order to do them justice, and I didn't give a rendition of Tam O'Shanter at Halloween either, though it was very Halloween appropriate. And then we finish with Auld Lang Syne, and everyone holds hands in exactly the same way as we do at New Year's in order to sing that. Even those who haven't looked into the history of Burns and swatted up on who he was as a man and his history are going to have come across more than a few anecdotes about how he was something of a ladies' man. But it could be something to do with his modesty that helped him in that regard. So he wasn't super egotistical. He didn't flaunt his successes in any real way. He was really, really modest about his poetry and how well they were being received throughout the UK and across the world. Even before he died, he was already something of a cult celebrity throughout just for his works, but it didn't make him that guy. You know the guy. So it comes across in a lot of the anecdotes that I've heard said of him throughout different publications. But he wrote a dedication in a publication of 1787. He wrote, "A Scottish bard, proud of the name, and whose highest ambition is to sing in his country's service. Where shall he so properly look for patronage as to the illustrious names of his native land? Those who bear the honours and inherit the virtues of their ancestors. The poetic genius of my country found me as the prophetic bard Elijah did Elisha, at the plough, and threw her inspiring mantle over me. She bade me sing the loves, the joys, the rural scenes, and rural pleasures of my native soil, in my native tongue. I tuned my wild, artless notes as she inspired. She whispered me to come to this ancient metropolis of Caledonia and lay my songs under your honoured protection. I now obey her dictates. Though much indebted to your goodness, I do not approach you, my lords and gentlemen, in the usual style of dedication, to thank you for past favours. That path is so hackneyed by prostituted learning that honest rusticity is ashamed of it. Nor do I present this address with the venal soul of a servile author, looking for a continuation of those favours. I was bred to the plough, and am independent. I come to claim the common Scottish name with you, my illustrious countrymen, and to tell the world that I glory in the title. I come to congratulate my country that the blood of her ancient heroes still runs uncontaminated, and that from your courage, knowledge, and public spirit, she may expect protection, wealth, and liberty. In the last place, I come to proffer my warmest wishes to the great fountain of honour, the monarch of the universe, for your welfare and happiness. When you go forth to waken the echoes in the ancient and favourite amusement of your forefathers, may pleasure ever be of your party, and may social joy await your return. When harassed in courts or camps with the jostlings of bad men and bad measures, may the honest consciousness of injured worth attend your return to your native seats, and may domestic happiness, with a smiling welcome, meet you at your gates. May corruption shrink at your kindling indignant glance, and may tyranny in the ruler and licentiousness in the people equally find you an inexorable foe. I have the honour to be, with the sincerest gratitude and highest respect, my lords and gentlemen, your most devoted humble servant, Robert Burns. Dated Edinburgh, April 4th, 1787. In addition to that dedication, was written by another who said that to his subscribers, the author, Burns, returns his most sincere thanks, not the mercenary bow over a counter, but the heart-throbbing gratitude of the bard, conscious how much he is indebted to benevolence and friendship for gratifying him, if he deserves it, in that dearest wish of every poetic bosom, to be distinguished. He begs his readers, particularly the learned and the polite, who may honour him with a perusal, that they will make every allowance for education and circumstances of life. But if, after a fair, candid, and impartial criticism, he shall stand convicted of dullness and nonsense, let him be done by, as he would in that case do by others. Let him be condemned without mercy to contempt and oblivion. It sounds as if he held no stake in what he did, but that he loved what he did is inherent in near every rhyme of his poetry. He loved his country. He was a true Scotsman, a true patriot, which a number of poems attest to. There is an anecdote of his from a friend, however. This is from Anecdotes of Burns, published in 1893. When Burns was in Edinburgh, he accompanied his friend Mr. Robert Ainslie on a horseback excursion through the south of Scotland. When they arrived at Coldstream, where the dividing line between Scotland and England is the Tweed, Mr. Ainslie suggested going across to the other side of the river by the Coldstream Bridge, that Burns might have it to say he had been in England. They did so, and were pacing slowly along on English ground, enjoying their walk, when Mr. Ainslie was astonished to see the poet throw away his hat, and thus, uncovered, look towards Scotland, kneeling down with uplifted hands, and apparently in a state of great enthusiasm. Mr. Ainslie kept silence, uncertain what next would be done, when Burns, with extreme emotion, and an expression of countenance which his companion never forgot, prayed for and blessed Scotland most solemnly by pronouncing aloud in terms of the deepest devotion the two concluding stanzas of the Cotter's Saturday Night, beginning, "O Scotia, my dear, my native soil, for whom my warmest wish to heaven is sent." Which, fair enough. You know, you got to take your moments, I guess, to purport a love for country, and for Burns, that was the right time for that. From the Elgin Courant and Courier for Tuesday, January the 31st of 1888, we have a report of the Burns Night in Glenlivet. As we briefly noticed on Friday, a Nicht wi' Burns was held in Glenlivet on Wednesday evening in commemoration of the birth of the Scottish bard. The auspicious event was celebrated with much enthusiasm, the choice talent of Glenlivet and the surrounding districts being willingly given for the occasion. The meeting was held in the Croftness schoolroom under the auspices of the Literary Society, and it was perhaps most successful that has been held in the Glen for some considerable time. Dr. Cameron presided in his usual acceptable manner, and in a few introductory remarks paid a suitable tribute to the illustrious bard of old Scotland. The following was the programme, which was gone through in a highly creditable manner. Selection: String Band. Song: Whistle and I'll Come to You, My Lad, and Encore. My Heart is Sair by Miss Smith. Song: My Nanny O by Mr. William Stewart. Song: Dainty Davy and Encore. My Love is Like a Red, Red Rose by Miss Maggie Grant. Song: The Lee Rig by Mr. Innes. Duet: Ye Banks and Braes by Mrs. M. and J. Grant. Song: Gae Bring to Me a Pint o' Wine by Mr. McConaughey. Recitation of Tam O'Shanter and Encore by Mr. Stewart. Song: Braw Braw Lads by Miss Cameron. Song: Duncan Gray and Encore. Whistle O'er the Lave O't by Mr. James Hepburn. Song O'er the Airts by Miss Monroe. Song A Man's a Man for A' That by Mr. William Stewart. Song Ca' the Yows by Miss McRobb. Recitation Man Was Made to Mourn by Mr. Johnson. Song Scots Wha Hae by a choir. Duet Afton Water by Miss Smith and Mr. Innes. Song Comin' Through the Rye, Miss A. Grant. Song Green Grow the Rashes O by Mr. William Innes. Trio Willie Brewed a Peck o' Mott by Messrs. Hepburn, Stewart and McConaughey, and a selection by the band. The choir, which was led by Mr. Charles Dawson and consisted of the Mrs. Grant, the Mrs. Purcell, Mrs. McRobb and Mr. McConaughey and Mr. Urquhart, gave several songs which were well received. The Glenlivet String Band gave selections which added much to the success of the evening. Amongst the vocalists, Miss Smith and the Mrs. Grant were specially well received. Mr. Stewart, Mr. Hepburn and Mr. McConaughey in their trio and individual solos greatly fascinated the audience. The Mrs. McRobb also did their song well, and Miss Smith and Mr. George Innes also rendered Afton Water to fine effect. The recitations given by Mr. Stewart and Mr. Johnson were well done, and reflected credit on those gentlemen. A feature of the evening was the reading by Mr. MacDonald of an ode specially prepared for the occasion by Miss Mackay. It was inscribed to the author's fellow members of the Glenlivet Literary Society, and was as follows. A noble singer hushed in death, whose memory ne'er will perish, we've met to sing his songs tonight, songs that we fondly cherish. For who e'er sang such songs as he, they set our hearts a-glowing, the banks and braes o' bonny Doon or Afton gently flowing. The world so cynical and cold ne'er understood him truly, but some clear-sighted ones who could appreciate him fully. A heart more true and kind than his ne'er beat in human bosom. It touched its core e'en to plough up the daisy's tiny blossom. His genius bright was hid within a casket frail and human, but oh, his heart was brimming o'er with love to men and women. That heart so full of noble thoughts was often cruelly riven. Such tired-out hearts can find repose but in the grave and heaven. He had some tastes of perfect bliss that made his heart so airy, when by Montgomery's castle wall he trysted with his Mary, or when the sun sank in the west and softly fell the gloaming, in Mauchline woods with bonny Jean in gladness he was roaming. When yonder hills are wrapped within a shroud of perfect whiteness, the smallest speck that we can see will mar its brilliant brightness. So visible unto all eyes was every fault and failing, but o'er them all within his breast the good was still prevailing. His lamp of life that burned so bright was quenched in life's glad morning. Death was to him a welcome guest, tired of the cold world's scorning. His song so thrilling and sublime shall be forgotten never, and in all loyal Scottish hearts his memory lives for ever. The ode was received with much gratitude, and the worthy authoress was cordially thanked for her trouble. The usual votes of thanks terminated a most enjoyable evening. Mr. MacDonald kindly lent his harmonium for the occasion. And much like with St. Andrew's Day, Burns Night is celebrated wherever around the world Scots have found themselves, especially Canada, America, Australia, etc. So we have an article from the Moray and Nairn Express for February the 24th, 1894, and it's of a Burns Night held in Duluth, Minnesota. It reads, an occasional contributor residing in Duluth, Minnesota sends us a copy of the Duluth Evening Dispatch, containing an interesting account of how Burns's anniversary was celebrated there. This modern-looking and progressive little newspaper thus introduces the subject of the celebrations, and from which some idea of their nature can be obtained. The birthday of Robert Burns, the great bard whose beautiful poetic gems have made both his name and his nation immortal, is never allowed to pass unnoticed by Scotchmen. No matter where they are, be they ever so few in numbers, there will be something to indicate that Bobby Burns lives as strong as ever in their memory. In Duluth, however, and fortunate it is for this city too, for they make the finest and most progressive citizens, there are a great many Scotchmen, and the birthday of the great poet always receives some formal recognition. This year it took the form of a banquet and ball at the St. Louis Hotel, given last evening by Clan Stewart. At 9 o'clock, when the guests entered the dining room, there was a very large crowd. The tables were arranged lengthwise of the room and seated about 250 people. These were filled at least twice, so that there were fully 500 present. The supper was more in the nature of a dainty lunch than an elaborate spread, and was served in an admirable manner, with an excellent programme of appropriate sentiments toasted in a right hearty manner, the rendering of Burns' songs and the reciting of Burns' poems. The evening was very pleasantly spent, while the celebration finished up with a dance. So I hope everyone had an excellent start to 2023, and I hope everyone enjoyed their Burns night, whether you deigned do that with haggis, neeps and tatties or not. And I wish you all the best for the rest of 2023. I wish Independence Live the very best for what comes next for them. And I will be concentrating this year mainly on the Random Scottish History Kids channel, which is what I'm going to need all of my time for the time being, hence my inability to continue doing these fun little episodes for Independence Live. But I want to say thank you to Kevin and everyone that helps with IndyLive and getting everything out there, and for giving me a platform to out some of what I find interesting with regards to Scottish history in the days that we celebrate. And everyone needs to take care and enjoy and look after themselves and each other. And I will see you again. Take care.